Cub spotted on a highway bridge. The driver's infant steered the rescue plan. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. Jessica Brooks pressed the gas pedal harder. The morning sun painted the highway with streaks of gold, and she wanted to get home before Mason woke from his nap. His soft breathing filled the car, a tiny whistle between each inhale. 10 months old, and already he had his father's stubborn chin. She glanced at the rearview mirror. The bridge ahead stretched like a ribbon over the valley, narrow enough to make her heart race. Traffic wasn't heavy, but trucks still thundered past in the opposite lane. The guardrails looked thin from this distance like matchsticks. A splash of brown caught her eye. Movement near the edge. She squinted, hands gripping the wheel tighter. Something small and furry pressed against the concrete barrier. Her breath caught. Was that a bear cub? The tiny animal cowered as an 18-wheeler roared past. Its fur stood on end. Jessica's foot eased off the gas. The cub's eyes were wild with panic, its small body trembling as it searched for an escape that didn't exist. Behind her, Mason stirred. A soft whimper escaped his lips. He usually slept through traffic noise, but something had disturbed him. Jessica checked the mirror again. The cub tried to move forward but stumbled, its paws scraping against the pavement. Her mind raced. What was a bear cub doing on a highway bridge? Where was its mother? The nearest forest was 5 miles back. This made no sense. Cars continued streaming past. None slowed down. Had anyone else even noticed? Mason's whimper grew louder. Jessica glanced back and froze. His eyes were open, wide, and alert. But he wasn't looking at her. His tiny face pressed against the car window, his small hands patting the glass. He was staring at the cub. The bear cub took another step, too close to the road edge. A sedan swerved slightly to avoid it. Jessica's heart hammered. She had seconds to decide. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. Mason let out a cry, sharp and piercing. Not his usual fuss, but something urgent. Something she'd never heard before. The sound startled her into action. She flicked on her hazard lights and eased onto the bridge's shoulder, the narrow strip barely wide enough for her Toyota. The cub turned at the sound of her slowing car. Its dark eyes met hers through the windshield. Fear radiated from every inch of its small frame. Jessica killed the engine. The sudden quiet felt wrong, unnatural. Behind them, cars continued their endless stream, oblivious to the drama unfolding. She turned to Mason. His face had gone red from crying, but he'd stopped making noise. Instead, he pointed one chubby finger at the window, at the cub. His eyes held an intensity she'd never seen in him before. Like he understood something she didn't. Jessica's training as an ER nurse kicked in. Assess the situation. The cub was maybe 3 months old, small enough to scoop up with 2 hands, but wild, dangerous if frightened. Where was the mother? The question nagged at her. Bears didn't abandon cubs, not unless something terrible had happened. Another truck thundered past. The bridge shuddered. The cub pressed itself flatter against the barrier. Jessica's fingers found the door handle. One wrong move could send the cub darting into traffic. She needed a plan. Mason babbled something. A string of sounds that meant nothing to her, but his tone was insistent. He kept pointing at the cub, his other hand now reaching toward her, like he was asking her to do something, to save it. She took a deep breath. Mother bears were protective, aggressive. If she was watching from somewhere, any approach to her cub would trigger an attack. Jessica scanned the tree line beyond the guardrail. Nothing moved in the shadows, just the wind rustling leaves. The cub made a sound, a small, pitiful whine that tugged at her chest. It was scared, lost, alone. Every maternal instinct in her body responded. She thought of Mason when he'd fallen off the couch last month. That same look of helpless terror. Her hand tightened on the door handle. This was insane. She was a single mother with a baby in the car. Getting involved with wildlife wasn't smart. It wasn't safe. But the cub took another step toward the road, and Jessica's body moved before her mind caught up. She opened the door. The highway noise rushed in, deafening after the car's insulation. Wind whipped her hair across her face. The smell of exhaust and hot asphalt hit her. She turned to Mason. "Stay here, baby," she said, her voice shaking. He watched her, those intense eyes following her every move. "Mommy will be right back." Jessica stepped onto the asphalt. The bridge surface was hot through her sneakers. She moved slowly, keeping her body low. The cub watched her approach, its muscles tensed for flight. She hummed softly, something she did when Mason had nightmares. The same melody that always calmed him. The cub tilted its head. Its ears perked forward slightly. Progress. Jessica took another step. The guardrail pressed into her hip as she squeezed between it and the passing cars. Each vehicle that roared by pushed a wall of air against her back. Her legs trembled with each narrow miss. Behind her, Mason made a sound. Not a cry, but something else. A long, musical note that rose above the traffic noise. Jessica froze. She'd never heard him make that sound before. Neither had the cub, apparently. It stopped backing away and just listened. The absurdity of the moment hit her. Here she was, on a highway bridge, trying to save a bear cub while her infant son sang from the car. Nothing in any parenting book had prepared her for this. She was 5 feet from the cub now, close enough to see its individual whiskers. Its fur was matted, dirty. Maybe it had been wandering for hours, days. The thought broke her heart. She extended one hand, palm up. Let it catch her scent. Mason's song continued, a wordless melody that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. The cub's trembling began to slow. Its breathing evened out. Jessica inched closer. 3 feet, 2 feet. She could reach out and touch it now if she wanted. A car horn blared. Someone had noticed her. The sound shattered the moment. The cub jerked backward, its paw slipping on the edge of the bridge. Jessica lunged forward just as the cub's body tipped over the guardrail. Her fingers wrapped around fur. For a terrifying second, they both hung suspended. Half the cub's body dangled over the drop while Jessica pressed herself against the metal rail, holding on with strength she didn't know she had. Below them, trees and rocks waited 60 feet down. Mason's song turned to screams. Panic shot through Jessica. She couldn't let go, couldn't fall. Not with her son watching. Not with this small life depending on her. She pulled with everything she had, her arms burning with the effort. The cub scrambled for purchase, its claws digging into her arms. Pain exploded through her skin, but she didn't let go. With one final surge of adrenaline, she hauled the cub back over the rail. They collapsed together onto the narrow shoulder, both breathing hard. Jessica cradled the cub without thinking. It was the size of a large cat, fitting perfectly in her arms like Mason had as a newborn. Its heart raced against her chest. Small whimpers escaped its throat. That's when she heard it. A low rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. She looked up. At the far end of the bridge, where woods met pavement, stood a massive black bear. The mother. Her eyes locked onto Jessica's. Even from 100 yards away, the protective fury was unmistakable. The bear rose onto her hind legs, towering 7 feet tall. Jessica's blood ran cold. She was trapped. The car was behind her, the mother bear ahead. The cub in her arms made soft chirping sounds, calling to its mother. And Mason, he had gone quiet. The mother bear dropped to all fours and started walking across the bridge. Her huge paws made no sound on the pavement. Cars swerved around her, honking, but she didn't flinch. She moved with deadly purpose. Jessica knew she had seconds to decide. Her nursing instincts warred with maternal ones. Save herself and Mason, or face down an angry mother bear to protect the cub she'd just rescued. The irony wasn't lost on her. The bear was 50 feet away now. Jessica could see intelligence in those dark eyes, not just animal instinct, but something more. The bear was evaluating her, deciding how to handle this human who held her cub. And then Mason did something extraordinary. He pressed both hands against his window and sang again, the same wordless melody that had calmed the cub. But louder this time, clearer. The mother bear stopped. Her head tilted, listening. The song seemed to hang in the air, immune to the highway noise. Jessica felt the cub relax in her arms. It made answering sounds, gentle chirps that matched Mason's rhythm. For a moment that stretched into eternity, predator and prey existed in harmony. Mother bear, human mother, and their babies connected by something beyond fear or evolution. Jessica understood then what Mason had known all along. This wasn't about danger, it was about connection. Slowly, carefully, Jessica set the cub down. It stayed close to her leg for a moment before taking tentative steps toward its mother. The bear remained motionless, watching. The cub gained confidence and trotted forward. When they reunited, the mother bear nuzzled her baby with such tenderness that tears sprang to Jessica's eyes. The bear looked at her once more, a long, measuring gaze. Then she turned and led her cub off the bridge, disappearing into the trees. The whole encounter had lasted less than 2 minutes, but Jessica felt changed forever. She stumbled back to her car on shaking legs. Mason grinned at her through the window, reaching for her with both hands. She collapsed into the driver's seat and gathered him close. He smelled like baby powder and innocence. His little heart beat steady and sure against her chest. "What just happened?" she whispered to him. He babbled in response, the same intense look in his eyes, like he was telling her this was just the beginning. Jessica started the engine with trembling hands. As she merged back into traffic, she noticed something on her dashboard. 3 claw marks scratched into the plastic. Blood from her arms had dripped there, evidence, proof. This really happened. But as the bridge disappeared in her rearview mirror, doubt crept in. Had Mason really guided that rescue with his singing? Had she really communicated with a wild bear? The whole thing felt like a dream, slipping away even as she tried to hold on to the details. Mason fell back asleep, exhausted by his unexpected performance. Jessica drove home in silence, her mind replaying those moments on the bridge. The memory would haunt her, and soon she'd discover it would do much more than that. Because what happened on that bridge was only the first chapter in a story neither she nor Mason could have imagined. And the mother bear, whose dark eyes had seen something in Jessica's face, hadn't truly left them behind. In the weeks to come, Jessica would learn that some connections, once forged, cannot be broken. That Mason's gift, if that's what you could call it, had awakened something ancient and profound, and that saving one bear cub would set into motion events that would reshape everything she thought she knew about nature, about motherhood, about the thin line between wild and tame. But for now, she just drove. The scratch marks on her dashboard caught the afternoon light, and somewhere in the distance, a mother bear led her cub deeper into the forest, their bond restored by a human's compassion and an infant's inexplicable song. The bridge receded behind them, growing smaller in the mirror until it was just another stretch of highway. But its significance remained, carved into Jessica's skin and soul, waiting to reveal its full meaning when the time came, because this rescue was no accident, and the bear would remember. By the time Jessica pulled into her driveway, the scratches on the dashboard had turned a deep burgundy. The blood had dried into something permanent. Mason stirred as she killed the engine, his eyes opening slowly. They wandered to the marks, and his tiny finger traced one of the grooves with fascination. She carried him inside, her arms still throbbing. The claw marks were deeper than she'd thought. Red welts crisscrossed her forearms like angry reminders. In the bathroom, she dabbed hydrogen peroxide on the wounds while Mason watched from his high chair. He'd become unusually quiet, his gaze following her movements with an intensity that unnerved her. The phone rang as she taped gauze over the deepest scratch. It was Anna, her neighbor. "Jessica? Did you see the news?" "No, what happened?" "Turn on Channel 7, now." Jessica balanced the phone against her shoulder and flicked on the kitchen TV. The local anchor's face filled the screen, his expression grave. The bear cub was spotted on Highway 42 bridge around noon today. Multiple witnesses reported a woman in a Toyota stopping to help, but animal control found no sign of either bear when they arrived. Officials are asking the woman to come forward with information. Jessica's hand froze on the remote. They'd caught her on traffic cameras. Grainy footage played across the screen, her car, her desperate lunge for the cub, even Mason in his car seat. The angle obscured their faces, but anyone who knew her Toyota would recognize it. "Jessica? You still there?" "Yeah, sorry, I need to go." She hung up and sank into a chair. This wasn't supposed to happen. The bear was supposed to disappear into the woods, and life was supposed to go back to normal. Now everybody knew. Everybody would have questions she couldn't answer. Mason made a sound. Not quite words, but distinct syllables. Ma, be. Jessica stared at him. Since when did he string sounds together like that? He wasn't supposed to start attempting words for another month or two. Her phone buzzed. Text after text poured in. Friends, family, even her ex-husband had seen the news. Each message asked the same question. "Was that you?" She ignored them all and carried Mason to his room. As she changed his diaper, she noticed something odd. His back bore 3 parallel scratches. Tiny, barely visible, but unmistakable. When had that happened? He hadn't been touched by the bear. He'd been safe in the car the whole time. Her mind raced back to the moment when the cub had slipped over the guardrail. Mason had screamed. She'd felt a surge of panic, followed by that incredible strength. Had something transferred, some energy or connection that marked them both? She dressed Mason in a fresh onesie and laid him in his crib. He didn't close his eyes this time. Instead, he stared at the ceiling, making those same melodic sounds that had charmed the bear cub. Jessica watched him, questions multiplying with each note. Her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Doctor Harvey from the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center where she volunteered on weekends. Her finger hovered over the reject button, but something made her answer. "Jessica, thank God. I've been trying to reach you." "Dr. Harvey, I can explain." "No need. A mother bear and her cub showed up at my facility an hour ago. They just walked right up to the gate and waited. I've never seen anything like it. The cub has your scent all over it." Jessica's heart skipped. "What?" The cub keeps making these sounds, like it's calling for someone. And Mason, that's your boy's name, right? The bear keeps responding to recordings of babies crying. I had to test a few when I couldn't figure out what was agitating her. Dr. Harvey, what are you saying? I think there's a connection. That bear trusts you, Jessica. Both bears do. They're healthy, no injuries except some minor scratches, but they won't leave. It's like they're waiting for something. Jessica's mind spun. This was insane. Bears didn't form attachments to humans. They didn't understand the concept of gratitude or obligation. Everything she knew about wildlife rehabilitation said they should have fled deep into the forest by now. I'll come by tomorrow, she said finally. After hanging up, she checked on Mason again. He'd fallen asleep, but his little hands were clenched into fists. In sleep, he made soft humming sounds, the same melody from the bridge. Jessica tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't settle. She kept seeing the mother bear's eyes, the way they'd studied her face. Human mothers recognized that look in each other, that fierce, primal need to protect their young. But she'd never expected to see it reflected back from a wild animal. At 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep. The scratches on her arms had begun to itch. She turned on the bathroom light and unwrapped the gauze. What she saw made her gasp. The wounds had changed. Instead of the angry red of normal healing, they'd taken on a silvery sheen. The edges looked cleaner somehow, more precise. When she touched one, warmth spread through her arm. Not painful, but definitely unnatural. A thud on the front porch startled her, then another. Heavy footsteps. Jessica grabbed a baseball bat from the hall closet and crept toward the door. Through the peephole, she saw nothing but darkness. The porch light was out. Strange. She'd just replaced the bulb last week. Another sound. Scratching. Just like the marks on her dashboard. Her heart pounded as she flipped on the outside light. There, sitting on her welcome mat, was the mother bear. Jessica stumbled backward. This was impossible. Dr. Harvey said the bears were at the sanctuary. It was 30 miles away, through residential neighborhoods and busy roads. How had she tracked them here? The bear didn't look aggressive. She sat like a patient visitor, her dark eyes focused on the door. Behind her, barely visible in the dim light, her cub peeked out from the shadows. A wail erupted from Mason's room. He'd never been a particularly vocal baby, but now his cry pierced the night air. The sound made the mother bear stand. She took one step toward the door, then stopped. Waiting. Jessica's mind fractured into competing instincts. Call animal control. Protect her baby. Understand what was happening. In the end, she did none of these things. Instead, she found herself opening the door. The mother bear didn't charge. She just watched Jessica, her massive head tilted slightly. The cub had emerged fully now, staying close to its mother's leg. In the porch light, Jessica could see its eyes. The same dark, intelligent gaze as its mother. Mason's crying stopped. Through the monitor on the hall table, she heard him making those melodic sounds again. The bears responded, the mother making a low rumble while the cub answered with higher chirps. "This is crazy," Jessica whispered, but her feet carried her outside anyway. The night air was cool against her skin. The scratches on her arms tingled as she stepped closer to the bears. She noticed now that the mother bear's fur had silvery streaks running through it, marks that matched the pattern of Jessica's changing wounds. The bears led her to the edge of her property, where the lawn met the small strip of woods behind her house. There, in the moonlight, filtering through the leaves, she saw something that made her question her sanity. Arranged in a perfect circle were stones, pine cones, and small branches. It was deliberate. too organized to be natural. Each piece had been carefully placed, creating a pattern Jessica recognized from Mason's favorite mobile, the one that had been hanging over his crib since he was born. The mother bear stepped into the circle's center and looked at Jessica expectantly. The cub trotted to her feet, then back to Jessica, as if encouraging her to join them. Every logical part of her brain screamed danger, but another part, the part that had felt that inexplicable connection on the bridge, urged her forward. She stepped into the circle. Immediately, warmth bloomed beneath her feet. The scratches on her arms blazed with heat. Mason's baby monitor crackled with static, then his voice came through clearly despite the distance. Ma, bae, ma, bae. Mother bear, he was saying, mother bear. The mother bear raised her head to the sky and let out a long, low call. It resonated through Jessica's bones, awakening something ancient and forgotten. The cub joined in, their voices harmonizing with Mason's through the monitor. Jessica felt energy gathering in the circle, swirling around them like an invisible current. Her wounds pulsed in time with her heartbeat. The silvery streaks in the bear's fur began to glow softly. Then understanding crashed into her like a wave. This wasn't just gratitude for rescuing the cub. This was acknowledgement, recognition. The bears, specifically this mother bear, had been watching human families for generations. She'd seen kindness before, but never from someone who already bore the mark of the wild. Jessica's maternal grandmother had told stories of animal guides and protective spirits. Jessica had dismissed them as folklore, bedtime tales for children. But now, those stories felt painfully real. Her grandmother had disappeared in the woods when Jessica was 12. They'd found her clothes, but never her body. The search team said she'd been raised by bears, a ridiculous claim that became family legend. The mother bear moved closer, her massive form suddenly less threatening. She lowered her head and, incredibly, pressed her forehead to Jessica's. In that moment of contact, images flooded Jessica's mind. She saw through the bear's eyes, the highway, the cub slipping through a fence, the frantic search, the traffic, then Jessica stopping her car. She felt the bear's terror, relief, and gratitude, but more than that, she felt the bear's recognition of something in her. When the contact broke, Jessica staggered. The bear watched her with ancient wisdom in its gaze. The cub approached and rubbed against Jessica's leg like a house cat seeking attention. "What do you want from me?" Jessica asked, her voice barely a whisper. The answer came not in words, but in feelings: protection, alliance, understanding. The bears needed a bridge between their world and the human one. They'd chosen Jessica as that bridge. Lightning split the sky without warning. The first drops of rain fell, heavy and cold. The bears turned toward the woods but paused at the tree line. The mother bear looked back once more, then disappeared with her cub into the darkness. Jessica stood alone in the circle as rain soaked through her nightgown. The stones and pine cones had been scattered by the sudden wind, as if the circle had never existed. Back inside, she found Mason sitting up in his crib, wide awake and smiling. For the first time since bringing him home from the hospital, he reached both arms toward her. As she lifted him, she noticed the tiny scratches on his back had turned the same silvery color as her own. The rain drummed against the windows as she sat in her rocking chair, Mason content in her arms. She thought about her life before this night, the routines, the career, the carefully planned future. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else now. Her grandmother's words came back to her. Some people are chosen by the wild. It marks them, changes them, calls them home. Jessica had always thought her grandmother was eccentric. Now she wondered if she'd been preparing for this moment her whole life. All those childhood summers spent in the woods, learning to track animals, identify plants, understand nature's signals. Had her grandmother known what was coming? As dawn painted the sky pink and purple, Jessica made a decision. She'd go to Dr. Harvey's facility that afternoon. She needed to understand what was happening with the bears, with Mason, with herself. But this time, she'd bring questions instead of running from them. Mason cooed against her chest, and she swore she heard words in his baby talk. Go, see, bears. The scratches on her arms had stopped healing like normal wounds. Instead, they were transforming into something else. Permanent marks that resembled ancient symbols her grandmother had once drawn in dirt. Marks that, according to family lore, granted protection to those who bore them. Outside, birds began their morning songs. Among them, she heard a different call, lower, more resonant. A bear call that matched Mason's rhythm. Jessica pressed her forehead to Mason's, mirroring what the mother bear had done to her. In that moment, she felt the full weight of what had begun on that highway bridge. This wasn't just about saving a bear cub. This was about awakening a legacy that had skipped a generation, landing squarely on her shoulders. And somehow, impossible as it seemed, her 10-month-old son was meant to be part of it too. The silver marks on her arms pulsed gently, as if agreeing with her thoughts. In the distance, that bear call came again. Closer this time. Whatever was happening, it was far from over. It was just beginning. The hunters had found them. Sarah's hand moved to a hidden panel beside the door, pulling out what looked like an ancient bell. The sound it made was almost subsonic, felt more than heard. Within seconds, the forest surrounding the cabin erupted with activity. Birds of all sizes took flight in coordinated patterns, their calls creating a wall of noise. Ground animals scattered in precise directions, leaving confusing tracks. Even the leaves seemed to move with purpose, obscuring the cabin's outline. Through the peephole, Sarah observed 3 people in official-looking jackets. The tallest carried a badge that gleamed in the morning light. They looked legitimate, exactly as the hunters would want them to appear. "Miss Brooks?" the lead agent called out. "Agent Martinez, Federal Wildlife Management Division. We have some questions about your interaction with protected wildlife yesterday." Jessica felt her marks burning. Not a warning exactly, but an activation. The symbols were reacting to the threat. Eleanor quickly ushered them into the basement, a hidden space accessed through a false panel in the kitchen floor. The basement wasn't what Jessica expected. Instead of dusty storage, she found a command center. Banks of monitors showed multiple angles of the forest around the cabin. Maps covered one wall, tracking wildlife movements and known hunter locations. A large bookshelf held specialized equipment, night vision goggles, tranquilizer darts, even what appeared to be recording devices for animal communications. "We've been monitoring hunter activity for decades," Eleanor whispered as they descended. "This isn't their first attempt to find a keeper." Upstairs, Sarah continued the conversation through the door. "I'm not Jessica Brooks. I think you have the wrong cabin." "Ma'am, we have video evidence linking a vehicle registered to Jessica Brooks to yesterday's incident. We just need to verify no protected species were harmed." The lie was smooth, professional. But Jessica could hear something underlying it, an eagerness that betrayed their true purpose. These weren't wildlife officials concerned about a bear cub. These were predators who'd finally cornered their prey. On the monitors, Jessica watched the agent's movements. The shorter one, a woman with angular features, kept scanning the tree line. Her hand rested near her hip where a gun would be. The third agent, broader and muscular, had positioned himself by the window, trying to peer inside. Mason had gone eerily quiet in her arms. His small hands gripped her shirt, and she realized with shock that his silver marks were glowing more intensely than ever before. When she looked into his eyes, they seemed older somehow, aware, understanding. "He knows," Eleanor observed. "He's already developing his protective instincts." A deep rumble shook the cabin, so low Jessica felt it in her bones rather than heard it. The bear call was different this time, aggressive, warning. On the monitors, movement caught her eye. At the tree line, barely visible in the morning light, stood Coda. Behind her, dark shapes moved through the shadows, more bears than Jessica had ever seen together. The clan had come. "This changes things." Sarah's voice crackled through an intercom. "Eleanor, activate the outer shields. Jessica, get ready to run." "What shields?" Eleanor pulled a lever built into the wall. Above them, a soft humming filled the air. Through the windows, Jessica watched as a faint blue shimmer surrounded the cabin, similar to what she'd seen in the forest circle but much more powerful. The lead agent's behavior shifted immediately. His casual stance straightened. His voice dropped the pretense of friendliness. "You're harboring a keeper. That makes you complicit in violating national security protocols." "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah responded, but Jessica could hear the tension in her voice. They were running out of time. The stocky agent drew his weapon. Not the standard firearm Jessica expected, but something else. It looked like a combination of dart gun and electronics, cables connecting to a small backpack he wore. "That's a neural inhibitor," Eleanor identified grimly. "It disrupts the connection between keeper and animals. They've been developing it for years." Horror washed over Jessica. They didn't just want to study her. They wanted to weaponize what she'd become, and if they had a way to damage the connection. "No signal on the radio," the female agent reported, her voice carrying clearly. "Whatever shielding they're using is blocking everything. Switch to Plan B." Plan B apparently involved the stocky agent pulling out a device that looked like a modified flamethrower. But instead of fire, it projected a stream of what appeared to be liquid nitrogen. He aimed it at the protective barrier around the cabin. The blue shimmer crackled where the stream hit it. Frost formed on the cabin's exterior. The humming increased to a whine. "The shield won't hold much longer," Eleanor warned. "That's hunter tech. They've been developing countermeasures for our protections." Sarah burst through the basement door, breathing heavily. "We have maybe 5 minutes before they breach. There's an old keeper tunnel system under this cabin. Eleanor, you'll guide Jessica and Mason out. I'll hold them here." "You can't. I'm 73 years old. My time as an active keeper has passed. This is exactly what I've been preparing for." Sarah's expression was fierce. "Your training isn't complete, but Mason's potential. He can't fall into their hands." The tunnel entrance revealed itself through a hidden trapdoor beneath an old carpet. Stone steps descended into darkness that smelled of earth and time. Eleanor lit a lantern, the flame blue like the shield outside, and led the way down. "Stay close," she instructed. "These tunnels were carved by the first keepers, hundreds of years ago. They connect sacred sites throughout the region, but they're also defensive measures. Many paths lead to dead ends or loop back on themselves. Only someone marked by the clans can find the true way." Jessica followed. Mason clutched to her chest. The tunnel walls were covered in the same symbols that now decorated her skin. Her marks began to warm, then pulse in rhythm with certain symbols on the walls. They were acting like a key, or perhaps a compass. Behind them, a massive crash indicated the cabin's main entry had been breached. Sarah's voice rang out clearly. By the ancient covenants, you trespass on protected ground." The response was drowned out by what sounded like a small explosion. Jessica's heart clenched, but Eleanor grabbed her arm. She activated the deterrence. They won't kill anyone, but they'll buy us time. The tunnels branched repeatedly. Each time, Eleanor paused, watching Jessica's marks. When they glowed brightest, she chose that path. After what felt like an hour of twisting passages, they emerged into a natural cave system. Stalactites dripped crystal water that collected in pure pools. The air was warmer here, almost comfortable. Bioluminescent lichens provided a ghostly blue light. And there, waiting patiently, sat not just the bear clan, but representatives from multiple animal families. The eldest bear spoke immediately. "The hunters have grown bold. They've surrounded the forest. We counted 12 of them, equipped with their disruption weapons." 12? Jessica was shocked. Such a large operation for one keeper? "They want the child," a voice said. Jessica spun around to find a woman emerging from the shadows, older than Eleanor, with completely white hair and eyes that seemed to shift color in the cave light. "I am Miriam Walker. I was keeper before Sarah, before your grandmother." The hunters learned about Mason through their monitoring networks. They know what he represents. "What am I missing?" Jessica demanded. "People keep saying how special Mason is, but no one's explaining why." Miriam approached, her movements graceful despite evident age. In the 1,000-year history of keepers, there have been rumors of a convergence. A child born with the ability to unite not just human and animal, but to bridge the growing divide between science and nature, technology and wilderness. She pointed to Mason, who watched her with those unnaturally alert eyes. "Your son doesn't just understand animal speech. He comprehends the mathematical patterns underlying natural systems. He sees the technological frequencies that disrupt animal navigation. He understands DNA coding as easily as you understand words." Jessica stared at her son with new eyes. "How is that possible?" "Because he was conceived and carried through a keeper awakening," Miriam explained. "Your pregnancy coincided with your latent keeper abilities activating. Every cell in his body developed with this dual nature. The hunters believe they can use him to create an interface, a way to control nature through technology." "Over my dead body," Jessica growled. The ferocity in her voice surprised even her. The marks on her arms blazed with matching intensity. "That's exactly what they're willing to risk," Miriam acknowledged. "But they've underestimated something crucial. They think of you as an isolated keeper. They don't realize you've already been adopted by multiple clans." On cue, more animals emerged from the cave's recesses. Wolves slipped from shadowy passages. A magnificent stag stepped forward, his antlers decorated with objects that might have been offerings. Owls lined the upper reaches of the cavern like silent sentinels. Even smaller animals, raccoons, squirrels, rabbits, gathered in respectful attendance. "The Great Council has been assembled," the eldest bear announced. "For the first time in 300 years, the animal nations unite to protect a keeper and her son." The implications staggered Jessica. This is war." "Not war," the stag corrected in a surprisingly lyrical voice. "This is what war prevented. This is the ancient alliance activating for its intended purpose, to maintain the balance when those who seek to destroy it become too powerful." Miriam touched Jessica's arm gently. "Your training wasn't complete because no keeper has needed to learn what you must learn. How to lead a united animal resistance. How to protect your son while helping him grow into his gifts. How to defeat enemies who use our own connection against us." Mason stirred, making sounds Jessica now recognized as attempts at words. Eleanor knelt beside them. He's trying to tell us something. Jessica focused on Mason's babbling. The marks on her arms tingled as understanding came. Help coming, sky friends. Before anyone could ask for clarification, a piercing cry echoed through the cave. Jessica's eyes shot to the cavern opening. Against the morning sky, she saw shapes that made her gasp. Birds, hundreds, maybe thousands of them. Hawks, eagles, falcons, every predatory bird in the region. They moved in perfect formation, not as individual birds, but as a living storm cloud. At their head flew the great horned owl she'd met at the first gathering, somehow larger than she remembered, riding currents of air that seemed to respond to its presence. The sky hunters answered the call, a voice announced. A hawk landed gracefully before them, transforming. No, that wasn't right. The hawk and the woman speaking were one and the same. Another keeper, one who had fully embraced her connection to the point where the boundary between human and animal had nearly dissolved. I am Arya Windcaller, keeper of the high places. Word spread fast through our networks. The hunters have made their move. They've brought technology we haven't seen before. They're preparing to flood the forest with sound waves that will disorient every creature for miles. Jessica's mind raced. What about the protective barriers? They've developed bypass technology, sound waves that match natural frequencies but carry artificial commands. They can override animal instincts, confuse their natural navigation. Arya's eyes were intense. If they succeed, every animal in the forest will be at their mercy. The animals in the cave grew restless, a ripple of concern passing through them like a visible wave. Jessica felt their fear through the marks, not for themselves, but for their families, their young, their clan members who couldn't fight back against such weapons. We need a strategy, Eleanor said practically. Jessica, your marks are still developing. Can you feel the extent of your connections? Jessica closed her eyes, concentrating on the warmth spreading from her marks. It was like standing at the center of a vast web, feeling vibrations along countless threads. Each connection represented an animal, not just in this cave but throughout the entire region. The network was enormous. I can feel them, she whispered. So many, and they're all watching us, waiting for something. For you, Miriam said simply. This is why keepers are chosen. The animals don't need human leadership. They need human understanding of human threats. They need someone who can anticipate technological warfare because they understand both sides of the conflict. A commotion near the cave entrance drew their attention. A raccoon chittered urgently, its message rippling through the gathering. The translation came through multiple sources simultaneously, creating a chorus effect. Hunters moving. 7 approaching the tunnel system. They have tracking devices. They're following the keeper traces, Arya deduced. Our energy signatures leave imprints in these old tunnels. Then we meet them on our terms, Miriam decided. She turned to Coda. Can your clan create a diversion? Something to split their forces. Coda rumbled agreement and issued a series of calls. 3 young male bears, massive and powerful, padded toward the cave exit with purposeful strides. Jessica, Miriam continued, you need to understand something. The hunters can track you through your marks. Usually, this is a slow process, but they're using one of our own against us. What do you mean? Samuel Gray. He was a keeper 30 years ago. Brilliant mind, but ambitious. He wanted to use keeper abilities to prove human superiority over nature. When we refused to teach him combat applications, he left. He's been with the hunters ever since, helping them develop countermeasures. The name connected in Jessica's mind to something her grandmother had written. In her journals, she'd mentioned a fallen keeper who had betrayed their trust. Jessica had assumed it was historical, not a present threat. He's the one who developed the neural inhibitor? Among other things, he's here now, leading this operation. Miriam's expression darkened. He has keeper abilities modified by technology. He can track you, and more dangerously, he can partially disrupt your connections. That's how they found you so quickly. Mason made a distressed sound. Jessica looked down to find him staring intently at her, his face scrunched in concentration. His marks were doing something new. They were creating patterns that seemed to move across his skin, like living tattoos searching for something. Eleanor gasped. He's trying to shield us. A 10-month-old is attempting keeper magic that takes decades to master. The animals noticed too. The cave fell completely silent as they watched this human infant channel power beyond his years. The moving patterns on his skin began to glow, creating a complex design that reminded Jessica of computer circuits or magnetic field lines. Then Mason spoke. Not baby talk, not attempts at words, but a clear voice that somehow seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Family needs hiding. The shock of hearing her infant son speak coherently nearly made Jessica drop him. But there was no time to process. The cave walls began to shimmer, responding to Mason's attempt at keeping magic. He's reimagining the protective barriers, Arya whispered in awe. Making them better? Stronger? No, Miriam corrected. He's making them incompatible with tracking technology. He understands both the magical frequencies and the technological signatures. He's creating a hybrid protection that can't be hacked. The shimmering expanded, flowing like liquid light across the cave walls. The animals moved closer, drawn by an instinct they couldn't name. Jessica realized with amazement that Mason wasn't just protecting them. He was upgrading the ancient magic with modern understanding. A roar split the morning air. Coda's voice, but it wasn't a warning. It was a battle cry. Through the cave entrance they could see and feel the confrontation beginning. The 3 young male bears had engaged the hunter team. But these weren't normal humans they faced. The hunters moved with enhanced agility, their neural disruptors creating visible distortions in the air when fired. Animals that got close enough faltered, their natural grace disrupted by the technology. It's working, Eleanor observed grimly. They're overwhelming the bears' natural advantages. But as she spoke, something changed. The disruption field from the hunter weapons flickered, then failed on one of the devices. The operator stared at it in confusion before a massive bear paw sent him sprawling. Mason, Jessica breathed, understanding flooding through her. The modifications he'd made to the protective field were interfering with the hunter's technology. Miriam grasped it immediately. He's found their frequency. He's blocking their disruption signals. The battle shifted dramatically. Without their technological advantage, the hunters faced enraged protective bears on uneven terms. 2 retreated quickly. 3 others tried to regroup, switching to conventional weapons. That's when the sky hunters struck. The birds descended in coordinated patterns that defied nature. Hawks dive-bombed the armed hunters, talons extended to disarm. Owls created a screen of confusion with their wings. Even smaller birds, sparrows and starlings, formed clouds that obscured vision and fouled weapons. Jessica had never seen anything like it. The animals fought with intelligence and strategy, not just animal instinct. They were an army with aerial support, ground troops, and what appeared to be specialized units for different tactical needs. A crackling voice came through a radio one of the downed hunters carried. "Beta team, status report. We're encountering heavy resistance. The barriers have changed. Our disruption fields are They're reversing feedback into our equipment. Static. Then, Samuel here. The child. He's modifying keeper magic in real time. All teams pull back. Regroup at the staging area. We need to recalibrate. The hunters began a tactical withdrawal. The animals didn't pursue once the immediate threat departed. Instead, they maintained defensive positions, watching their enemies retreat into the deeper forest. Jessica turned back to Mason, who had slumped against her, exhausted. His skin no longer glowed, but the patterns had remained, forming an intricate map of the protection he'd created. "What just happened?" she asked, knowing no one could fully answer. Miriam approached with newfound respect in her eyes. "Your son just revolutionized keeper magic. He found a way to make our ancient protections adaptive to modern threats. In one instinctive action, he's altered the balance of this entire conflict. But he's exhausted. How could a baby—" "The convergence," Arya interrupted softly. "We theorized about it for generations. A keeper born not just with abilities but with an inherent understanding of how to bridge the conceptual gaps between worlds. Science and magic. Technology and nature. Human and animal." Eleanor was examining Mason carefully. "He needs rest. That much power expenditure would challenge an adult keeper. But Jessica, look at your marks." Jessica glanced down. Her patterns had evolved again. New symbols had appeared, interweaving with the existing ones. The bear clan marks now connected to wolf totems, bird symbols, and designs she didn't recognize yet. Her network of connections had expanded dramatically. "The animals bound themselves to you through Mason," Miriam explained. "By protecting him, they've pledged themselves to your keeping. You're no longer just Coda's chosen protector. You're the keeper of the United Clans." The weight of that title nearly buckled her knees. How had she gone from a single mother to this? Yesterday she'd saved one bear cub. Today she was apparently the focal point of an interspecies alliance. Coda padded over, her massive bulk somehow comforting rather than threatening. She nuzzled Jessica's arm, a gesture of acceptance. Then she spoke words that changed everything. "Your grandmother walked among us for 5 winter cycles after she disappeared. She learned our deepest secrets, our oldest fears. She warned us this day would come. She said, keeper blood carries a prophecy, that the one who saves Bright Star will mother the one who saves all." Jessica stared at the bear. "The one who saves all." The balance between worlds grows unstable. Humans push deeper into wilderness. Technology advances without wisdom. Animals struggle to adapt to changing climates and shrinking territories. Coda's voice held ancient sorrow. The convergence child can either heal the rift completely or witness its final destruction. The cave fell silent as the magnitude of Mason's destiny settled over them. Jessica looked at her sleeping son, this tiny human who had just displayed power that terrified trained adults. How was she supposed to raise a child with the weight of 2 worlds on his shoulders? "One step at a time," Arya offered, reading her thoughts. "First, we must deal with the immediate threat. Samuel Gray will regroup. He has funding, technology, and the authority of shadow government agencies. He won't stop until he has Mason. What he doesn't realize," Miriam added, "is that Mason has already changed the rules. Every protection spell cast today created a template. Other keepers can now modify their magic the same way. The hunter's technological advantage is diminishing." "But at what cost?" Jessica worried. "Mason nearly burned himself out. He's just a baby. He shouldn't have to fight like this." "He won't," promised the great horned owl who had landed nearby. "The next phase of our strategy doesn't require his active participation. We need information. The hunters have a base somewhere in these mountains. They're using it to coordinate their technology development. If we can locate it— Wait, Jessica interrupted. Are you suggesting we attack them? We suggest we learn their plans and prepare accordingly, the owl clarified. The keeping way is defense and balance, not aggression. But we must know what we defend against. Eleanor was studying maps she'd pulled from her bag, based on the direction they retreated and accounting for terrain that could support a hidden facility. She traced potential routes with her finger. There are 3 possibilities: an abandoned mining complex, old military bunkers, or these limestone caverns that connect to an underground river system. The caverns, Coda stated with certainty. Your kind has drilled deep beneath the mountains recently. We feel the vibrations, hear the machinery. They believe they're hidden, but the earth tells us secrets. How do we get close enough to investigate? Jessica asked. If they have detection equipment, they won't detect what they can't imagine, Arya said with a slight smile. She began removing her clothing. Jessica was about to protest the inappropriateness when Arya's form shifted. It wasn't a clean transformation like in stories. It was fluid, organic, like watching someone step through a doorway into a different version of themselves. Where the human keeper had stood, a magnificent peregrine falcon now perched. Shape-shifting, Miriam explained, the rarest of keeper abilities. Fewer than 1 in 1,000 develop it fully. Arya spent 20 years perfecting the transition. The falcon spoke with Arya's voice, though the sound seemed to come from everywhere. I can scout their facility, see their equipment, their numbers. They won't suspect a natural predator hunting above their base. She spread her wings, easily a 6-foot span, and launched herself through the cave opening. Watching her soar away, Jessica felt both awe and fear. If this level of ability was possible for keepers, what might Mason become? A commotion drew her attention to the cave entrance again. The 3 male bears were returning, but they weren't alone. They dragged something, someone, wrapped in vines and branches. When they deposited their burden before the council, Jessica saw it was one of the hunters. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with a face marked by intelligence and fear. When he saw Jessica, his eyes widened. You're her, the new keeper, the mother of the Convergence child. Who are you? Miriam demanded. Dr. David Chen. I was a research scientist with the Bureau, Wildlife Biology Division. They brought me in 6 months ago to study keeper phenomena. His words tumbled out rapidly. I didn't know. They told us it was theoretical research. We were developing detection grids, communication methods. But then Samuel arrived and everything changed. What changed? Jessica asked, moving closer. The focus shifted to control, to weaponization. Samuel showed them his research, how keeper connections could be forcibly established, how animals could be compelled instead of communicated with. David's voice cracked. We could create artificial keep bonds, command animals like drones. I objected, tried to leave, but they said I knew too much. Eleanor knelt beside him. You're a prisoner, not a volunteer? For the last week, since I tried to resign, they said if I helped them capture you, they'd let me go. But I know better. People who know about Project Looking Glass don't walk away. He looked up at Jessica pleadingly. I can help you. I know their systems, their weaknesses. I know what Samuel has planned. And we should trust you. Why? Miriam challenged. Because I have family too, a daughter, 3 years old. David's voice broke. If they perfect their control methods, what happens to the natural world? What kind of planet will she inherit if all wildlife becomes programmable assets? The animals around him stirred uneasily. Trust didn't come easily in their world, especially for humans who worked with those who threatened the balance. Coda approached the captive scientist, her massive head lowered until her eyes were level with his. She studied him intently, and Jessica realized the bear was sensing more than visual cues. She was reading his energy, his intent, the truth beneath his words. After a long moment, Coda rumbled, "He speaks truth mixed with fear. His heart is divided, but his concern for offspring is genuine. Then he lives," the eldest bear decided. "And he will share what he knows, but he remains bound until we verify his information." David slumped with relief. "Thank you. I'll tell you everything. Starting with what they're really doing underground." Over the next hour, David revealed a picture that grew increasingly disturbing. Project Looking Glass wasn't just about studying keeper connections. It was about hijacking them. The facility hidden in the limestone caverns housed advanced biotechnology labs. They'd been working with captured keeper DNA, studying the genetic markers that allowed for the connection. "They've been harvesting DNA from former keeper locations," David explained. "Blood traces on sacred stones, skin cells from traditional meeting places. They've assembled a database of keeper genetics going back centuries. That's how they found you so quickly," Eleanor realized. "They probably have samples from your grandmother's time. Your genetic signature would have flagged immediately in their system when the incident on the bridge was recorded. But Samuel has something else now," David continued. "When news reached him about the child, about Mason, everything accelerated. They believed that a keeper with convergence abilities could be the key to unlocking forced control of the entire animal kingdom." Jessica's blood ran cold. "How?" "The theory is that Mason's unique genetic structure, keeper abilities enhanced by fetal exposure to awakening energy, created a template. If they can sequence his DNA, they believe they can replicate the compatibility factors. Create synthetic keepers with selected abilities. Slave keepers." Miriam spat the words like venom. "Worse. Keeper-enhanced humans with no connection to nature, only to technology. Beings who could control animals without the wisdom or restraint of real keepers. They estimate they could have a prototype within a year if they get a sample from Mason." The cave erupted in agitation. Animals of every species expressed outrage through sounds and movements that combined into a symphony of fury. Even with her developing keeper abilities, Jessica found the emotional resonance overwhelming. Mason stirred in her arms, responding to the turmoil. His small hands reached up, touching her face with surprising coordination. When he spoke this time, everyone heard it clearly. "No fear. We stronger. Together stronger." The simple statement carried power that silenced the cave. These weren't just words from a baby. They were understanding from something more. The convergence ability at work, analyzing complex threat patterns and offering the adaptive response. "He's right," Arya said, her voice cutting through the lingering echoes. The peregrine falcon perched on an outcropping, her scouting mission complete. "I've seen their facility. David's information is accurate. But I've also observed their greatest weakness." "Which is?" "They work from a single location. All their research, all their technology development, all their power systems, everything runs through that underground complex. They've invested so heavily in one approach they haven't built redundancy." Miriam stroked her chin thoughtfully. "One point of failure. Dangerous for humans, but we're not bound by their linear thinking." "What's the plan?" Jessica asked, feeling events moving beyond her control, but not knowing how to slow them down. "We don't destroy," Coda clarified. "We neutralize. The natural way. The cavern system connects to underground rivers. These rivers can be redirected. Water finds all paths, seeps through all cracks. Their equipment will fail without violence, without permanent harm. Just flood them out. David seemed surprised. Nature reclaims, the eldest bear explained. Technology must respect natural boundaries or suffer natural consequences. We merely remind them of this truth. The strategy developed quickly. The Beaver clan, expert in water management, would lead the river diversion. The tunnel-dwelling animals, moles, groundhogs, badgers, would map the precise weaknesses in the cavern structure. The birds would maintain aerial surveillance, and the bears would guard against any aggressive response. "What about us?" Jessica asked. "You need to complete your training," Miriam decided. "The next phase relies on your ability to coordinate this alliance, and David needs to help disable their tracking systems before the operation begins." The scientist nodded eagerly. "I can access their network remotely. I still have my security credentials. If I can get to a terminal." "The cabin's computers are shielded," Eleanor offered. "If we can get back there safely." "Then we divide," Arya announced. "Jessica, Mason, Eleanor, and David will return to the cabin. Miriam and I will coordinate with the animal clans here. We strike when the moon rises." The plan set into motion with remarkable efficiency. The animals had done this before, perhaps not with technology as advanced, but the principles remained the same. Protect the territory, protect the keepers, maintain the balance. As they prepared to move, David pulled Jessica aside. "There's something else, something I didn't tell the others yet." "What?" "Samuel mentioned a failsafe. If they lose control of the facility, they've prepared a biotoxin. Not lethal, but it will disrupt keeper marks, sever the connections permanently." He called it airset button for the keeper line. Horror washed over Jessica. He'd destroy the entire keeper network? He sees it as preserving the natural order. In his twisted view, keepers are the real violation of species boundaries. He wants to return things to how they should be. Jessica's mind raced. How could someone who had been chosen as a keeper have fallen so far from understanding? But perhaps that was the danger. Those who gained power without wisdom inevitably abused it. We need to stop him. There's more risk than you know. The toxin doesn't just affect keepers. In high concentrations, it can cause permanent neurological damage in animals, too. It targets the brain chemistry that allows for complex social behavior, problem-solving, tool use, anything that hints at higher consciousness. The implications staggered her. He'd make animals simple, reduce them to pure instinct. He calls it ecological correction. Removing the traits that allow animals to adapt to human encroachment, making them naturally selective for extinction in developed areas. All thought of caution fled Jessica's mind. This was genocide hidden behind scientific language. The Keeper Network wasn't just about communication. It protected the intelligence and social complexity that allowed species to survive in a changing world. "We go now," she declared. "Alert the others. Every second we delay gives them time to prepare that weapon." But as they turned to share this new information, alarm rippled through the cave. The lookouts, a family of raccoons positioned at various tunnel entrances, chittered urgently. Coda translated with growing concern. "Hunters are returning. Larger force. They've brought vehicles that can navigate forest trails. And Samuel is with them." Through the cave entrance, Jessica could hear mechanical sounds that didn't belong in the wilderness. Engines. Not cars exactly, but all-terrain vehicles with modifications that hummed with technological enhancement. "They're coming for Mason," Eleanor realized. David's capture must have triggered an acceleration of their timeline. Or they tracked my keeper marks, Jessica added grimly. I led them right here. No, Miriam corrected. They would have found this place eventually. The old caves have always been known to both sides. What matters now is how we respond. The eldest bear rose to his full height, a living mountain of fur and muscle. Let them come. This ground is sacred. Here, the barriers run deepest. Their machines will fail first. Jessica wasn't so sure. The humming grew louder, accompanied by what sounded like drilling equipment. They were attempting to force a larger entrance, one that could accommodate their vehicles. They're breaking ancient protections, Arya observed with shock. No follower of Samuel's path would dare, unless they've found new ways around the old magic, David suggested reluctantly. Project Looking Glass included research on deactivating keeper protections. They've been testing counter frequencies for months. Shouts echoed through the network of tunnels. The hunters were getting closer, and they were using more than technology. They were using keeper knowledge twisted into weapon form. Jessica felt the marks on her skin heating up in response to the threat. Mason made worried sounds, his own marks pulsing rapidly. The baby could sense the approaching danger in ways she was still learning to understand. We stand, Coda declared. Some battles must be fought to preserve the peace. This cave has witnessed the turning of ages. It will witness this turning as well. Eleanor handed Jessica a backpack. Emergency supplies. If we need to run again. I'm not running. Jessica surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. These people would steal my son's future. They'd destroy everything the keepers have protected. I won't hide anymore. A crashing sound announced the hunter's breakthrough. Vehicle headlights cut through the cave gloom. The mechanical humming intensified to a point that made Jessica's teeth ache. 3 modified vehicles entered the cave, part jeep, part tank, covered in equipment that resembled both scientific instruments and weapons. The lead vehicle bore Samuel Gray himself. Jessica's first glimpse of the former keeper shocked her. He looked younger than she expected, maybe 50, but his eyes held a hardness that spoke of corruption. The marks that should have connected him to nature had been altered somehow. His arms bore surgical scars where keeper symbols had been removed and replaced with technological implants that glowed with artificial light.